Look to make a start. First of all, thank you to everybody for taking the time to join us this afternoon, for joining the ACS and Sophos on this Hackventure. And I won't take up any more time other than to introduce John and Lee, who will now take you through a short overview and presentation of how the hackers work. So, John, over to you.
Fab, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, so let me add my welcome to you all as well. Welcome to this afternoon's session on Choose Your Own Hackventure. So strap yourselves in for a webinar quite unlike any other that you've attended, because during this session you guys will have the opportunity to steer a real hacking campaign. So we're going to allow you at various different points to choose the route that we go down in order to pick on our would-be victim. So you would expect an event like this to have some kind of exciting intro and some kind of exciting theme tune, and well, I can meet you halfway on that. We do have some lovely graphics there to welcome you once again to the Hackventure. Let me introduce myself as well. So my name is John Hope. I'm Senior Technology Evangelist at Sophos. So it's my privilege to be able to talk about all the great technology that we have and do presentations like this. However, the main man for this session is definitely my friend and colleague Lee Sunter, who's going to do all the clever stuff in the background, and we'll meet Lee in just a second. But like I said, what we're going to do during this session is we are going to take you through and you're going to work with us to conceive and execute a targeted attack against our victim. And what we're going to do is we are going to go through some of the steps just like a real cyber criminal would do. So we are going to start out by doing some reconnaissance. We are going to size up our victim before creating a weaponized document and delivering that document in such an interesting way that hopefully our victim interacts with it. And then we will go through the process of then installing some malicious content on their machine and taking over their machine before ultimately hopefully cashing out on some kind of action on objective. So we're going to go through this. You may have seen the Lockheed Martin cyber kill chain before. Basically the analysts over at Lockheed Martin basically considered a cybercrime type attack and incident as being very much like a military operation. So they divided it into all of these sections just through here, as you can see on the screen. So like I said, we're going to take you through some of those steps, but before we do that, what we are going to do is start out with a little bit of recon, and we've saved you some legwork so that we can get down to the interesting bits. And we've already decided who our victim organization is going to be, and we have selected the Acme Sprocket company as our potential victim. And the reason that we've selected the Acme Sprocket company in particular is, well, for a number of reasons. One is we happen to know that they are particularly cash rich. We have, through our various different sources, worked out that these guys are about to launch something that will revolutionize the sprocket market, and therefore they have some potentially interesting intellectual property which we might be able to steal just a little bit later on. And we've also picked this organization in particular because it turns out that some of the staff there are a little bit free with what they share on the internet and have provided us with some very interesting materials. So we are going to use in just a moment the first of many fantastic cyber criminal tools. We're going to use the power of things like Google and social media to work out how to entice our victims. But this is the first opportunity for you guys to steer the Hackventure and to influence how we do things. So we are going to launch a poll. Oops, sorry. We are going to launch a. Bear with me. Why can't I launch a poll? Right. You might need to help me out on this one. This is interesting. Are you able to launch a poll on my behalf?
Yep.
Fab, thank you. I don't know why that dialog box has disappeared. Teams has been quite interesting. Fab. So the poll is what you can see on the screen there, which is basically selecting your would-be victim from these three. So while we're spinning up that poll and allowing you to vote, then let me introduce our three potential targets. The first of which is Steve Rogers. Steve Rogers is the Chief Financial Officer for the Acme Sprocket company, and The reason that he's potentially interesting is, of course, as the CFO, he has access to lots of very interesting financial data. And we like the look of him because he's very busy on Instagram and has a very open Facebook profile, which we can use to learn a little bit more about some of the things that he likes. And we've already found out that he's quite into his retro TV shows. Our second victim there in the center is David Lightman, and he's the Senior Systems Administrator at the Acme Sprocket Company. And we're interested in him because, again, he's quite free with what he shares online. We know a little bit about his skills and expertise thanks to some of the things that he's posted online. And again, he has quite an open Facebook and Instagram profile. We've already worked out that he's quite a lover of cats. And then our last potential victim is Angela Bennett, and she's the HR operations specialist at the Acme Sprocket Company. And we're interested in her because obviously as the HR specialist there, she's got lots of access to potentially personal identifiable information. And again, very open with Facebook. We already know that she loves to holiday. In fact, there's loads of selfies of her in various different exciting locations all across the world on her social media profile. So yeah, if we can spin up that profile there, vote, then you've got the opportunity to influence us and see which way we go first and who we're going to pick on. So who do you want to be your first victim? Okay, right, so let's have a look at those results. Looks like most people want to pick on Angela Bennett, so that's absolutely fine. We can certainly do that for you. So let's have a little sneaky peek at what we can find out about Angela Bennett. So Angela Bennett is, as I already mentioned, the HR operations specialist. You can see here's some of the Instagram posts that we found. Looks like she's currently holidaying in San Diego at the moment, and looks like she's had a bit of problems with the internet there. Maybe she's not quite so technologically savvy. Trying to pick a movie down there in the bottom right hand corner and taking some advice from some of her colleagues at the Acme Sprocket Company, I see. But the one thing that's really interesting on here is you'll notice in the top right hand corner there, she looks like she's currently boarding a flight somewhere, and looks like a BA flight, and looks like she's got a bit of cash in the bank there, because that looks certainly something a little bit more salubrious than cattle class. So let's use the fact that Angela Bennett is in the process of taking a flight, and let's use that knowledge that we've gathered against her. Now I'm going to hand over to Lee in just a second, but before I do that, we are seasoned professionals, honest. Please don't try this at home. Most of the protection and controls around Intercept X and our endpoint protection have been intentionally turned off. In fact, to be honest, parts of this afternoon have been quite an interesting marriage of trying to control the dichotomy of hacking a machine that's protected by Sophos and trying to turn off some of these features, and critically leaving them turned off has been quite challenging. But we have managed to disable the protection on this device, and that's absolutely something that you definitely shouldn't try at home. So with that in mind, I am going to hand over control to Lee. And Lee, let's have a look at our setup. So what you can see on the screen here now, just to paint the picture for you, is on the left hand side we have Angela Bennett's computer. So that's our victim on the left hand side. On the right hand side we have our hacker's machine, and that machine is a Kali Linux install. If you're not familiar with Kali, then basically it's a version of Linux with loads of really neat hacking tools inbuilt with it, and that's going to make our lives a little bit easier when we start to attack this machine in just a moment or two. But just to reiterate and reconfirm what I said, let's just open up the Sophos endpoint on this machine, and let's just make sure that everything that's turned off is indeed turned off as it should be. So you can see that almost all the protection on this machine has actually been disabled. Now, we've intentionally left a couple of little items open, and they might come into play depending on which way we go with the Hackventure, but you can see that most of the protection is turned off. So don't think because the Sophos shield's at the bottom there that we do a terrible job of protecting. That's not what we're trying to illustrate at all. What we're trying to show is exactly the opposite, and we'll show how some of the last resort protection measures that we've left switched on actually can save us in certain scenarios. Okay, so with that out of the way, Lee has been busy while I've been padding and chatting away, creating a malicious document which is targeted towards Angela. So remember that she was about to board a flight. Well, we know that she's coming back from San Diego on a holiday, and she's coming back to the UK. So we've sent her a confirmation from British Airways, but if you notice, it tells her that a flight has been booked to Los Angeles, and that's probably going to pique her interest because she's thinking, I don't want to go to LA, I want to go back home to London. So, you know, have BA messed up? Have I booked the wrong flight? What's going on here? So we are targeting her current mental state, and we are providing something here, the content that looks like it may well be interesting for her. So we're hopefully going to pique her interest here, and you can see it looks pretty official, right? So I've already told you it's a phishing document, but it looks pretty legit, right? I mean, if that arrived in your inbox, would you be able to tell the difference? You know, it's addressed to her in person. It, you know, looks pretty convincing. But anyway, let's open the document up, Lee, and let's have a look and see what we can see inside. So it says your urgent confirmation is needing. Typical phishing attack characteristic here. We're creating a sense of urgency. Now, put yourself in Angela's shoes for a second. She's busy thinking she's booked the wrong flight and she's going to the wrong place. It's now telling her it's urgent. She's probably going to click on this stuff. And what it's doing here is asking us to activate the active content in this document. Now, hopefully you already know this is a bad idea, but people fall for this time and time again. So let's do the bad stuff and let's enable the active content on this machine, and let's see some hacking in action. Oh, well, that was a bit underwhelming, wasn't it? See, if you notice that nothing actually happened on the left-hand screen there, she's clicked on the document, we've activated the active content on there. Nothing's happened, right? But look on the right-hand side, and you'll see that Meterpreter here running on our Kali Linux deployment has actually opened up a session to our victim machine already. So we've already got ourselves a little bit out of a leg into the organization. So now that we've got that little bit of a connection in there, this again is an opportunity for you guys to start to steer our Hackventure. And this is the opportunity for you to choose what you would like to do next. So your choices are threefold. Now that we're into this machine to an extent, what do you want to do? Do you want to escalate privileges and see if we can go higher than Angela's privileges, maybe get administrative access? Do you want to steal credentials out of this machine? So stealing usernames, stealing passwords out of this machine? Or do you want to stage persistence? Do you want to make this foothold that we've got more permanent so that we can keep coming back into this victim machine time and time again? So those are your three choices. I'm going to vote as well because I've got my favorites. Okay, looks like a lot of you are in for the long game, which is good, but I hope you don't have any plans for the rest of the evening, by the way, because we'll be here for a little while. Staging persistence is a really, really good choice. And the reason why it's such a good choice is that sometimes the protection on the machine is going to kick in and it's going to boot us out of the sessions that we've got established. Sometimes the user might turn their laptop off and walk away. And there's a whole bunch of other factors that might occur that mean the session that we've just worked so hard to establish and duped Angela into opening that document, it could get torn down at any time. Lee's hoping that I hurry up here and we actually get on with things because it could break at any moment. But if we can stage persistence, we can create something on this machine that we can come back to time and time again. And like I said, this is a common cybercriminal technique. It's kind of called living off the land, where we can basically just keep farming this machine for more and more information, farming it for more and more different types of attacks. So that is a good choice. And I am very much on board with that, and I may have voted for it myself. So that's what we're going to do. We are going to stage persistence, and what we need to do first of all, actually this is a little bit of a trick because we need to escalate our privileges if we're going to stage persistence as well. So we need to start moving up the food chain just a little bit. So what we'll do first of all is we'll have a little look at the session we've got established. Let's have a look at our user ID and find out where we're at. So you'll notice when we do this that we are currently occupying the user space. So we look like a regular user that's logged into this machine, and that's not enough. We need to go higher. We need to get higher levels of privilege. So what we're going to do is use an inbuilt command within Kali called get system, and that is going to try various different hacking tools on our behalf because we're kind of lazy, and it's going to see if we can get system level access. And it looks like it's failed. Okay, now that it's a live demo, so stuff does go wrong sometimes, and that's not anything to worry about. It is quite normal. There are lots of things that could be inbuilt with the machine that would cause this to fail, and the most likely candidate is user access control, or UAC. So we're quite determined hackers. we're going to get around this problem and we're going to try some other techniques. So we're going to first of all get sysinfo. What this is doing is telling us about our victim machine. So it tells us the computer name, the operating system, the level of patch, all that kind of stuff. And we could go a bit further. We could start looking at the applications running on this machine, and we could start working out which ones are out of date and which ones are vulnerable. But frankly, has anyone got time to do that? I mean, I hear there's a case of beer coming up later on. Let's get to it in a little bit more of an easy way, because we are, I want to say efficient hackers, but the truth is that we're probably lazy hackers. And Kali Linux helps us out enormously here, and Meterpreter helps us out enormously here by having some inbuilt tools. So we're going to use one of those inbuilt tools. We're going to use the local exploit suggester, and that's doing exactly what it suggests. So when we hit that command, then what's going to happen is we're going to start looking at our victim machine. It is going to find all the things that are potentially exploitable on this machine. This, by the way, while it's working this out, is a good advert for patching, because the more you keep your software up to date, you are closing all the little loopholes, all the little things that potentially could be used in this way to get into the machine. So the more you patch, the shorter your list of potential exploits actually is. But you can see we've got some results here coming up. The one that I'm really interested in is the event viewer, so the bypass UAC event viewer, because we know that event viewer is almost always running, and we know that it's running at a higher level of privilege. So we are going to copy that exploit and we are going to load it into our session, and we're going to use that exploit attack against our victim machine. And again, if you look to the left hand side, you'll notice nothing's going on as far as the user is concerned. But with any luck, we should see a second session established. So we're going to load that into session 1, and we're going to launch the exploit. And fingers crossed, we should see a second session coming up now. So you'll see there session 2 opened. And if we find out the user ID, you'll see that we're still at the user level here, but we've basically bypassed the user access control. So we can start moving things up a little bit. So let's just get the user ID and let's just double check. So you can see we're still in the user space, but we've also managed to bypass the user access control. So if we can bypass the user access control, then we need to find something that's running at NT authority level. So let's have a look at the applications that are running. So by hitting PS, we're looking at the all the portable executables running on this machine, and you'll see there's quite a lot there. So actually the one I know that I want to go for is the search indexer, because again, the search indexer, we know it's running at authority. We know that it's likely to be running on this machine. So yeah, you can see that is process ID 6080. So what we're going to do now is we are going to migrate into that process. So we are going to nab all of the capabilities and access privileges of that process. So we're going to move into that process. And that's done. So now if we find out who we are as a user, what you'll see now is we are NT authority system. So we've got the keys to the kingdom here, right? So we can pretty much do whatever we want inside this machine, and it gives us pretty much free reign access. But bear in mind that this is still transient temporary access, because if Angela shuts the computer down now, if we get cut off from the internet now, then we have to wait for her to open that document again before we can do anything. So if we're going to stage persistence, we need to find something that we can keep coming back to. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up the contents of the startup folder on this computer. So I told you we're lazy hackers. Cutting and pasting is key here. Saves Lee wearing out another keyboard. There we go. So we're looking at the startup folder, and what you'll see there's two things in there, but Putty is the one I'm really interested in. Now, Putty is an absolutely prime candidate for this kind of attack, because Putty is a low-level application. You'd expect to find it on system administrators' machines. It's probably in the startup folder because you use it all the time. Critically, it doesn't get updated very often, so we're going to do something pretty naughty to Putty in a minute. And because it doesn't get updated on a regular basis, it's never going to be overwritten, it's never going to be overruled. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of code caving here, and I'll explain what code caving is in a second. But what we need to do first of all is we need to get a copy of that Putty executable from the programs folder, and we're going to download it to our hacker's machine. So we're going to grab that and we're going to bring that copy down It doesn't matter, by the way, if that program is actually running at the moment or not. We can still go and find that file and we can bring it down even if it's actually a currently active program. Cool. So there you can see it's being downloaded now. It's coming down. Now we're going to do something super duper clever. We're going to open up Shelter. Shelter is a favorite hacking tool. And we are going to use it to do some code caving. So we are, again, lazy hackers. In the interest of efficiency, we're going to run the automated mode, and we are going to get Shelter to look at our PuTTY executable. So the PE target, the portal executable target, is the copy of PuTTY that we've just downloaded. Okay, so once Lee finishes typing that off, then Shelter's going to start looking at that portable executable. And what it's currently doing is it's looking through all the lines of code inside PuTTY, and it's looking for spaces and gaps where it can install extra lines of code. So it can install malicious content into that that particular program, that particular process, basically to do what we want. And this is a particularly neat tool, and I like a pun. I'm a dad, and I love dad jokes. So Shelter's a bit of a dad joke. It's a bit of an in joke, because what we're going to do is we're going to insert a reverse shell handler into PuTTY, and that's where the shell bit of Shelter comes from. But Shelter is also obviously some kind of protection, and what we're doing is we're inserting our malicious code into an application, and we're creating a cool little den that we can hang out inside PuTTY. While we're doing this as well, another little word of caution: if you, and I'm sure you don't do this because I'm sure you're upstanding moral citizens, but if you happen to go to the internet and download programs that might have been hacked and might be free and available on various different sites, they've probably already been code caved, because nothing comes for free, right? So if somebody's uploaded a version of this, there's probably some malicious code injected into it. It happened in the same way that this has happened. So anyway, that's Shelter. You'll see that it's kind of finished. It's found where the gaps in code are. Now it's asking us, what do we want to install in there? So we're going to install payload number 1, which is a reverse TCP shell. So what that means, that's clever speak for creating a reverse connection every time PuTTY opens up back to our machine. We need to tell it where our machine is. So that IP address of 11.11.10.201, that is our hacker's machine. So we're telling the poisoned version of PuTTY where it needs to call home to when it boots up. Okay, so it's now injecting all of that malicious code, all of that malicious content into that version of PuTTY, and it has finally finished. But obviously having that on our victim machine isn't, on our hacker's machine isn't a lot of good. Okay, what we need to do is get it back into our victim's machine. Okay, so now we are going to upload the sneaky beaky version of PuTTY that we've just created. We need to send that back to our victim. Okay, now this is one point, by the way, where if PuTTY was running, obviously you can't write to a running program, so we would actually have to stop the process first, but that would be easy enough to do. So we've uploaded that version of PuTTY, and it's now arrived on our victim's machine. Now we're not going to do anything with it just yet. But that is definitely going to come into play a bit later on, and that is definitely going to be useful for us later on in the future. But we're going to move on. We're going to tee up for the next question now, and we're going to tee up to that by moving back into the user context. So we're going to hop out of NT Authority. We're going to find a process that we know runs in the user context, which in this case is OneDrive. So we're going to come down into OneDrive, and we're going to migrate into that process. So we're going to migrate into process 6444. And that will move us back to the user space. So if we get UID one more time, then you'll see that we are now back in the user space. Okay, so what we've done so far is we've downloaded a copy of PuTTY, having escalated our privileges to the point where we've got that level of access, and we've injected malicious content into PuTTY, and we've put it back on our victim's machine, and it's now sitting there dormant, just waiting for something to happen. So that's where we're up to now. What we're going to do next is give you again an opportunity to decide what you want to do in terms of what to do next. So we're going to open up a poll for you and give you the opportunity to decide what you want to do next. So the 3 choices that we've got here are the choice to do a network recon, so basically hunting around the estate and looking for other resources, other assets in the estate that we can potentially compromise and look to. We can look more locally, and we can have a look at files on the local machine and see what we can find that's juicy and useful on our local machine. Or we can start to carry out a bit of malicious kind of spying, and we can find out what this user is doing by monitoring their activity in a live fashion. So those are 3 choices you've got, and if you can submit your votes to that, then we will move forward. Okay, so it looks like most, well, there's a bit of a tie here actually. So a bit of a tie between network recon and monitoring user activity live. So Lee, I'll let you decide which way you want to go with this. Which one do you fancy? Lee gets a cast of vote because he's doing all the typing. You're on mute, Lee.
How did that happen? Network recon, you fancy?
Network recon, yeah, we'll do okay. We'll do a bit of network recon, like style. Okay, cool. So if we're going to do some reconnaissance on our network, then we need to find applications that are going to give us access across the network and things that we can hijack. So one of the things that we need to do here is enumerate the applications on this machine and list all of the active processes on the machine. So we're going to enumerate the applications. And again, even though the machine seems pretty idle, there's a fair amount on there. There's a few things on there that catch my eye almost immediately. The first of which is actually right at the top conveniently this time around, which is FileZilla. Now, I happen to know that this particular version of FileZilla is vulnerable to a certain inbuilt attack that we've got in here. And then a little bit lower down, we should find the Remote Desktop Connection Manager, the RDC Manager. Now, clearly that's an interesting target, right? Because that is an application which is written and intended to connect to other resources in the network. So the Remote Desktop Connection Manager is pretty much prime for this sort of thing as well. So what we're going to do is we are going to use some inbuilt tools that have very kindly been provided to us by the writers of this particular Linux distro. We are going to use the FileZilla client cred command to exploit and steal credentials from that particular vulnerable version of FileZilla. So very quickly, you can see there we've got some information on a server. We've got a protocol associated with it. We've got a username and a password. So the username and password are obviously particularly useful things that we can use in the future. So that's quite handy. We can also do something very similar with the Remote Desktop Connection Manager as well. So there's a similar command here, the RDC Manager creds command we are going to use to pick on that Remote Desktop Connection Manager, and we're going to take some credentials out of that as well. So there you can see we've got Office server, we've got the logon name of fileshare_admin, and a password that looks pretty sophisticated actually. It's got lowercase, uppercase, letters, fancy characters, super secret. This yeah, it's a good one. I like that one. So we're going to use those credentials, or we're going to certainly show you how we could use those credentials. The first thing we need to do, however, is work out where that Office server is. So we're going to drop into Shell, and we are then going to ping that Office server so that we can get an IP address for it. This is the bit where we wish we'd picked smaller domain names. And
yeah.
There we go. So the IP address of that one is 11.11.10.10. Okay, so we can obviously use that to our advantage. Now, bear in mind that most networks will have some kind of network access control, and what we really want to do is kid the server into thinking that the commands that we're about to send it are coming from a local machine inside their estate. So we've still got Angela's machine on the left-hand side here, and what we're going to do now is we're going to turn it into a proxy so that we can route our commands to Angela's machine, then to our server. So as far as the server is concerned, this is a legitimate request request which is coming from Angela. And how we're going to do that is we are going to use the auto route command in here. So what we're going to do is, like I said, turn Angela's machine into a proxy so that we can route transactions and requests through Angela's machine. So we're going to load that auto route into the currently active session. We're going to tell auto route what the subnet looks like for this particular machine, so that it knows what the network topology is and it knows how to route things. And then once we've got that established and a routing table established, we're going to spin up the proxy on that machine so that we can start sending transactions to that machine. So we're going to set the proxy up, we're going to give it a port number, and we're then good to go, and we can start to route transactions through that proxy. So we're going to set port 9050. We're all good. So now what we're going to do is we are going to use the remote desktop connection through the proxy chains command, so through that proxy that we've established, and we're going to open up an RDC connection to that server. Now bear in mind, like I said already, we're using that proxy so that it, as far as the server is concerned, this is coming from inside the estate and is a perfectly normal, perfectly legitimate request. And it would be the devil's own game to try and find this if you were going to search through your logs and stuff, because it looks like it's come from Angela's machine. So you'd be hard pushed to tell the difference. Okay, so there's our login screen. Now remember, we stole those usernames and passwords earlier on. We could potentially log in here, but I don't want to play our hack in hand too early. Okay, so there's some other stuff we need to do first, and I don't want to start triggering off any alerts by logging into this machine just yet. So we're going to stow that for just a little while and come back to that one just a little bit later on, because what we need to do now is we need to start thinking about, well, hey, we've got bills to pay. We might want to cash out on this particular attack that we've got. So I've just launched a poll for you, and your choices are twofold here. So we can either further gain foothold into the network by conducting a network attack and finding out if we can own other machines and start to take over other machines. Or alternatively, what we can do here is we can actually start doing some ransomware. So we can actually launch ransomware against this machine, and we can see if we can get them to pay out and give us some cash to get their data back. So again, this is your choice entirely. You are the cyber criminals. You're on the driver's seat. You know, what do you want to do? Let's have a little look. Ooh, okay, that's interesting. This has got, am I right in thinking this is the first time that network attack has come out above ransomware?
I think you're right.
I think it is. Okay, I feel a little cheated actually, because I quite enjoy doing ransomware. Not that I should never say that, by the way. Don't put that on my LinkedIn profile. That's absolutely not true. Okay, so network attack is fine. We can do a bit of network attack. What we're going to do with the network attack is we are actually going to use quite a commonly used exploit in just a moment or two. But just to paint you a bit of a picture, because we went mooching around the network earlier on, we've actually already established that proxy with Angela. Remember that we got the remote desktop connection screen up there and we can talk to the server. So we've actually done a lot of the legwork associated with the network attack already. So that's kind of bought us a little bit of time. So if you want to have a look at monitoring user activity live, then we might stow that one for a little bit later on, because you just bought yourselves a bit of time back. Anyway, I digress. What we're going to do first of all is we are going to use, like I said, a commonly used exploit. We're going to use the Eternal Blue exploit. You've probably heard of Eternal Blue at some point. It was actually sort of made famous, if you will, by WannaCry, and it uses the SMB protocol, which most servers have established. And if you've not updated your SMB, then this potentially is something which is still exploitable in the wild. So we're going to spin up the Eternal Blue exploit, and we are already setting our remote host for that. So that is the machine that we are going to attack. We're going to force exploit true. So what that's doing is basically making sure that we're going to fire that attack off. We're not going to assess in advance to see if it's vulnerable. We're just going to go straight to it and fire off that attack. Now we're just desperate to push the enter button here to exploit, but just hang on a second. I want to turn everyone's attention to the left-hand screen. So look at Angela's machine for a second. Right down the bottom there, in the bottom right-hand corner, you'll see the Sophos shield. In a second, spoiler alert, Do you remember we left certain scans on for Sophos? One of the things that we left on was the intrusion prevention detection. So obviously Eternal Blue has been a known exploit for a while. We have a signature associated with Eternal Blue, and it's part of our IPS signature check. So spoiler alert, this is one place where Sophos is actually going to intervene still, because the IPS is still running. When we launch this exploit, the outbound packets from Angela's machine will be scanned by Sophos. We will realize that we are launching an IPS signature based attack, and it is going to block it, and it's going to kick off when we do that. So Lee, go ahead and press enter, and everyone watch out for the little red X there, and you should see the dialog box happening pretty quickly. Oh, it's going, it's going. Here it is, there it comes.
There we go. Go.
It's gone. Right, there you go. See, it's kicked off. So the malicious network traffic has been detected. Sophos has intervened, and you'll notice, again, go back to the right hand screen there, you see that Meterpreter sessions 1 and 2 have died. That's because everything that's allied to that IPS detection, Sophos has just killed all of the processes associated with that. So it's seen an IPS signature, it's seen that it's come out of the applications that we're talking to, and it's now killed those transactions. So we've just been booted out of this because Sophos has kicked off. And what's happening now, you might just be able to hear Lee's nook sort of spinning up and using a lot of CPU power, because what's happening is Sophos Clean is now looking at the machine here with Angela, and it's looking to see, well, you know, where did that attack come from, what's allied to it, what's associated with it, what do I need to remove, and it's doing that whole kind of cleanup process. Okay, so I haven't seen the dialog box yet, but I've been chatting away. Has Clean finished yet, Lee? Is it still going?
Yeah, it's done maybe 10 seconds.
Oh, I've wasted 10 seconds of your life, guys. I'm really sorry. So what's happened, like I said, Sophos has cleaned up all of those things, and we're done now as hackers. At least you might think we are. But do you remember we created that Cocave putty? Well, I told you it was going to come in useful, and now is actually the time, right? So on the right hand side, you can see we've been booted out. We've got nothing attached to this machine. But next time Angela reboots her computer, or next time she opens up Putty, we're going to be right back in the game. Okay, so Lee, if you want to go over to the left hand side there, and let's be Angela for a second. Let's open up Putty. And you'll see, well, you don't see much on the left hand side. It looks like Putty, right? And that version of Putty works like Putty should. But on the right hand side, you'll see that we've actually re-established a connection into that machine. So you can see we're back in at the user level. So Angela doesn't realise, but we've just been kicked out. You think it's been cleaned up, but we're right back in the game again. Okay, so on the next reboot up there, we're right back in again. So we can have a little bit of fun with this. I said you'd bought a couple of minutes, so should we just have a very quick look at monitoring a little bit of user activity?
Yeah.
So we won't go through it all, but we'll do a bit of fun stuff. Should we take a little screenshot?
We can indeed.
Yeah. So let's have a look at the screenshot.
Right there.
There we go. So a nice little screenshot. Now, one of the other things that we could potentially do as well is we could put something like a keylogger in there. We could open up the webcam on this machine. We could even start streaming video off this machine live and just constantly watch what the user's doing. There's heaps of fun stuff that you can do with this. And obviously, you can imagine how those kind of attacks would be quite devastating. If you can pull the keystrokes out, then obviously it's very easy to harvest passwords and that sort of thing out very, very quickly. And obviously taking screen dumps or taking video means all the intellectual property and all that potentially sensitive data on that machine, we could very easily steal all of that stuff. But we probably ought to move on just a little bit. So we're going to, everyone take your hacker's hat off now for a second. And what we'll do next is we will go into Sophos Central. And shall we have a look at some of the things that Sophos Central has seen? And we'll show you how you can then start to investigate attacks like this. So the reason that we kind of wrestle with having Sophos installed on this endpoint, even though we turn everything off, is we want to collate all the interesting events and all of the data out of the endpoint, so that we can build up attack chains and understand what's going on this machine in just a little bit more detail. So if we look at that top threat case there. That's the IPS threat case that was just triggered off when we launched Eternal Blue. So across the top of the screen is the real simple workflow. So this particular machine here, Acme laptop number 1, was involved in launching Outlook, which was the root cause of an incident that was actually detected through OneDrive and was detected by Sophos and then ultimately cleaned. So that's the kind of real executive summary. But obviously there's a wealth of detail underneath there. So what you can see in that beautiful diagram now, that looks a bit like a dandelion in the wind. You know, probably should be in marketing with terms like that. What you've got there, so you can see the little red dot there where it says Outlook. So that is our root cause. Okay, so that's where it all started. Remember, we had Outlook open, and then we opened up that that document. In fact, you can, somewhere in that mess is the British Airways itinerary document that we opened, and then you can see obviously when you click on that, it's going to open up Office so that we can handle that document, and then you can see it actually starting to form out some network connections. Now it all looks a little bit lively in there, so what we could do is we can either start pulling this apart piece by piece and looking at the things like there should be some IP connections in there just before we consolidate this down, so you can follow each of the chains down. So that 11.11.10.201 is our hacker's machine, so you can see that eventually that calls out to our hacker's machine with that initial session. But if you want to make things a bit more concise, then you can actually narrow the view down, and instead of having all of the axes and processes involved in this, then you can just go straight to the direct path. And what this shows is a very quick view of it. Started off in Outlook and went via Office, went through various different Windows command processes, ultimately through PowerShell. This is where we were doing things like the privilege escalation process, so there should be an injection in there somewhere. And then eventually we use Windows Search Indexer to open up OneDrive, and then that sanctions PowerShell to launch off the Eternal Blue exploit. So you can see the kind of attack chain going all the way through there in a little bit more detail. Should you want to pull those apart, like I said, you've seen the IP connection going through there. You can see the files that were touched as part of this attack as well. So maybe if you go back to the full view on there, you should be able to see some of the files that were transacted through. More interesting with ransomware, this one, so you can see which files were written and which ones were read as part of a ransomware attack. So the attack chain on that one does look a little bit more interesting sometimes, but there you can see those are some of the files that were interacted with as part of this attack chain. So you can really start to pull it apart if you wanted to. But one of the things that's really interesting, and Lee, I saw you were itching to go over there. If we go back to PowerShell, one of the instances of PowerShell that's in here, and we look at the reputation, this is a bit of an interesting one. So if you look at the reputation score associated with any of those, then you'll find that they're very high. So they're green because obviously these are legitimate applications, and it's only when you start to look at the way that those have actually been utilized that you realize that those are actually being used to call out bad commands. So there you can see it's right towards the right hand side of the screen there with the sort of green known good reputation, because these are all legitimate business tools at the end of the day, which you'd expect to find. And it's only when you start drilling down into the commands that are used that you realize how the bad guys in this case have actually used those in a malicious way. So it's great to have these tools available, but obviously you need a bit of expertise to be able to interpret these attack chains sometimes and understand exactly how those attacks have been used. Anyway, what we should probably do is give you just another opportunity to influence things. Actually, Lee, is there anything else you want to highlight on this threat chain before we go on a threat hunt of our own?
I would just say, if you think of your incident response plans and how you would take a response to these particular threats. So if you did have an incident where you had a machine learning detection or a IPS detection or something like that, how you look at the remediation points and how you look to respond to that particular incident. So as John pointed out, you have a summary at the top, but we also have things like suggested next steps where you could actually isolate the device whilst you do your threat investigations. Same with scanning the device, go through that documented procedure, and then finally that will bring us on to running live queries where you can actually query the endpoints for malicious connections, exactly what John will go through now, actually, encoded PowerShell, and any known exploits
Yeah, so actually the audience may not be familiar with Live Discover, so that's quite neat actually. That's basically looking at the intelligence we've got in a real-time way, and we can actually respond to stuff as well on here as well, and hopefully that we might end up going down that route if we've got time. But I should probably stop padding and launch a poll. So obviously we can investigate the incidents that we've seen, but the XDR platform as part of Sophos Central can also be used to embark on human-led threat hunting as well. So embarking on searches maybe before the fire alarm's gone off. We can look for various different things that are suspicious in here, and it does become a bit of an IT general tool as well. So you can use it to look for things like applications that are out of date. You can look for particular instances where things are installed. You can really search to your heart's content. But the three things that we've lined up for you to choose from here is, if we're going to embark on a threat hunt, do we want to look for unusual and potentially suspicious network connections that might be established? Do you want to look for PowerShell being utilized in potentially suspicious ways, like you've seen through some of these demos? Or would you like to have a look for behaviors that might be associated to an exploit that we already know about, something that's already out there in the wild? So I'll leave it up to you to make your selection. Okay, so there's quite a clear winner on that one. Most people want to have a look for unusual network connections, and that's a pretty good call actually, because a lot of cyber criminal malicious activity is going to form malicious network detections and suspicious network connections, either internally, because obviously once you've got a victim, just like we did, once we got Angela on board, we want to start then spreading around the network and seeing what else is kicking about that's useful. So using those network connections internally to start moving laterally around the network, but also of course the cyber criminals are never inside your network. They are always on the outside world. So we can also look for network connections that are established across the internet, where they might be exfiltrating data, they might be sending commands backwards and forwards as well. So, you know, having those kind of searches available is really, really useful. So let's go down the route, let's go down the route that the audience has selected, and let's have a look at unusual network connections. And we're going to use the XDR searching to have a little mooch for exploits that network connections that might potentially be suspicious in nature.
Perfect choice, in my opinion. Okay.
Yeah, it's a good place to start.
So what we can do is go into our network connections. Let's take a look at what we have. Processes with an open network connection.
Okay, so what XDR is doing now is it's busy having a little look through all of the processes running that are connecting out to other places. So some things will be legitimate, and some things we might find something quite interesting on here. So let's have a little look.
That's what we have. Okay, let's have a look. Okay, so our machine here is actually here. Let's take a look. Yeah. That's connected. Yes, it is.
Oh, so it's just fetching some data. Got a love a live demo, haven't you?
Yeah. Let's take a look. Let's check our machine.
It's all going so well.
Let's take a look here. The machine is actually offline.
Ah, winner. Okay.
Available here. Let's take a look. There we go. So that has re-enabled, which is fine. Should be speaking back.
So I'll have a little chat about the architecture while we're sorting that out. So the endpoints, they're feeding data into Sophos Central. So we have what's gloriously called the data lake at Sophos that basically we feed all the endpoint data into, so that you can perform queries on your estate. And it's worth talking about the fact that that data is collated not just, obviously primarily from endpoints and servers, but then also from of the Sophos products that we have. So things like our firewall, like mobile control, like our public cloud offering, all of that feeds into the data lake and hydrates the data lake, which is one of my favorite terms, so that we can then query cross estate and start looking across the whole estate. So obviously one of the sort of prerequisites of that is being internet connected, so that we can get that intelligence and get that information together. So fingers crossed we should be able to
So we'll start that.
Oh, I didn't realise you started a keystroke scanner. You were reading my mind. We could have shown that off.
Okay, so yeah, that machine is still offline. So what we can do is look at Live Discover and see if we can run this from another. Okay, not on that one. That one.
So for the purposes of this, for just network connection, you could probably open up another machine and just we can show. Although we can't obviously show the exact attack chain, you can kind of get a bit of a feel for what you can see out of the.
Yeah. So is that running on there now? Let's take a look. So that's on 2. That is on. Yeah. Okay. So you can't see that right now, but what you would have seen is all of the connections, as we can see here, where they're established to, the remote IP address, the reputation, the remote ports, but most importantly, the path as well. So in the instance where we launched PuTTY and PuTTY established a connection to the remote attacker, you would see that in here under PuTTY establishing that connection to that known malicious command and control Kali Linux box. That way you could take a look at that, and from there all you would need to simply do is take a look at actually going into the device using our live response tool.
Yeah. The live response, while he's loading it up, is a very neat tool that's inbuilt with Sophos Central. It works particularly well in the modern age where a lot of people are still working from home. We can actually use the live response service to open up a command shell connection directly back to that machine, wherever it happens to be. So if you need to do a bit of admin on a machine that you've seen something in Sophos Central that doesn't look right, and you want to maybe kill a process or something like that, then you can use the live response service to do all those clever things.
So what we'll do is enable that, because this has to be enabled on the devices. So we will live response on here. And we will make that available on this one and this one. So they are now available. Go back into our settings. And we can live respond. So we look at our investigation.
For audit purposes, obviously we need to then record why we're opening a session to this machine. So that will be stored in the logs. There you can see we are connecting to that machine. So we've not had to open any ports, we've not had to change any policies apart from enabling live response in the first place.
Can list the service, and then we would find the process ID of the malicious service and simply shut that process down because we have system level access.
Yeah. So if you want to kill something off, there's a really simple way of doing that as part of the response service.
I can't really kill something off because that's an active running machine. So
Yeah, don't do that, but you could, in principle, do that. Yeah.
Absolutely, you could do
Not derail the demo anymore than it's already gone slightly astray. Yeah, absolutely not. But you, obviously, I'm sure the audience can sort of see where the advantages of something like that would be. So if we happen to, if you play the scenario out and we found PuTTY was forming a connection to a known command and control server, we could go into live response, we can find the PuTTY process, we can kill the process associated with it. So That's obviously a very useful kind of workflow. Okay, is there anything else you want to show off while we're in here?
I will log into another environment, so I'll be able to do those live queries for you as we have drinks or after the drinks, and we can take a look at those commands that we have the opportunity to run. So I'll establish that piece of the lab, so we can take a look through at that incident response, how that would look, and elaborate a little further.
Cracking. Okay, so well, before I hand over to our friends from the brewery, does anybody have any comments, any questions that they want to ask at this point? And there's loads of opportunities while we're all enjoying a drink, but if there's anything that's really pressing that you feel like you want to ask now, then now's a good chance to unmute and ask. Or type away if you prefer. If you're not comfortable with coming on the microphone, that's fine too. Oh, thank you, Sam. So Sam says you really enjoyed that.